Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over my personal top 10 favorite cards from March of the Machine Aftermath. We're in an interesting predicament. The whole set actually had been previewed already, and then Wizards officially announced it just last week. So I'm sure a lot of people have already had time to think about what their favorite cards are from the set, but here we are. And also because it's the first mini set, it's this top 10 is going to go over 20% of the set, which is pretty crazy. It's pretty interesting. I don't really know what kind of implications that's going to have on the game, but it's kind of interesting just to see how it plans out. Before we begin, I should mention that this is just my personal top 10. I'll kind of go over why these cards are in my top 10, but if any of the cards from the set are in your top 10 and I don't talk about them today, leave a comment down below. All right, number 10 on the list is Training Grounds. For 1 blue mana, it's an enchantment that says activate abilities of creatures you control cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1 mana. Now, this is actually not a new card. It is a reprint, but it is a much needed reprint. Training Grounds, I think, has only had one other real printing at any point, and it was getting pretty expensive, so getting it printed into a standard legal set should have the cost of it come down quite a bit. And if you are playing a blue deck with a lot of activated abilities, even if you just have a blue commander with an activated ability, this is an all-star in that deck, so I'm very happy to see it reprinted. Number 9 is going to be Nixolous Captive Kingpin. For 2 black-red, it's a 4/3 legendary demon with flying and trample. Whenever one or more opponents each lose exactly 1 life, put a +1/+1 counter on Nixolous Captive Kingpin. Exile the top card of your library. Until your next end step, you may play that card. Now, there's a lot of Rakdos decks that I think that Nixolous could end up in. My first thought is obviously Prosper, because Prosper cares about exiling, and just incidentally, that deck tends to run a lot of cards that do exactly 1 damage anyways. But if you want to build around Nixolous, I think that's going to be pretty dang good. Also, I'm going to double check, but I think it goes infinite with All Will Be One, so it would be really interesting to see if there's a standard deck that comes out with that combo in mind. Number 8 is the Kenriths Royal Funeral, which for 2 white black is a legendary enchantment. Whenever the Kenriths Royal Funeral enters the battlefield, exile up to 2 target legendary creature cards from your graveyard. You draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the greatest mana value among cards exiled this way. Legendary spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card exiled with the Kenriths Royal Funeral. If you are playing a legendaries, creatures, matters kind of deck, this is a great include in that because it's going to draw you a couple cards. It's going to make your cards cost a little bit less. I've been playing with the idea of maybe building a legendaries matter deck, and I haven't committed to it yet, but if I end up building that deck, I think this would be very good in there. I think it's going to slot really well into a lot of other decks, specifically Joda or Sisay. I think this card is going to be great in either of those decks. Number 7, we have Gerina, Dauntless General. For white and a black, it's a 2/2 human soldier. When it enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard, and you can sacrifice her to give humans you control hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. I don't know how powerful this really is as a commander. I mean, a 2-mana commander that's going to keep graveyards in check. You can sacrifice it to keep your board alive. That seems pretty good. I feel like you lose a lot by only being in 2 colors if you're playing human tribal, but still seems like a pretty decent commander. And then it's also just going to go in the 99 of a lot of human decks. Specifically, I will be putting this in my humans deck, which if you haven't seen the newest episode of our Commander Gameplay series, Upkeep, I played my Humans Matters deck, so you should go check that out. Number 6 is Rebuild the City. For 3 black, red, green, it's a sorcery. Choose target land, create 3 tokens that are copies of it, except they're 3/3 creatures in additional to their other types, and they have Vigilance and Menace. This just seems like a really interesting and fun kind of card. It's kind of ramp, but it's also adding power to the board, which is a fun combination. It just seems very Jund. Your lands that you're ramping are going to be creatures, which means they die to removal, they die to board wipes, and especially if you're playing on a budget, maybe you don't have great lands to hit, so maybe you're just hitting a basic or a really boring kind of enter the battlefield tap kind of lands, like maybe one of the gain life lands. But if you're playing at a higher budget, I mean, maybe you wouldn't play this card because it doesn't seem all that powerful, so maybe it's not quite strong enough to make the cut. I see situations where you might copy something like Field of the Dead, which would be absolutely bonkers, copy an Urza's Saga, copy a fetched land, anything like that, all of a sudden gets really, really good. Lord Windgrace from Dominaria United, which is like a lands matter Jund deck, and I think it would be really cool to see this card go in that deck. I also have just been looking for an excuse to build a new Jund deck, and I think it would be really fun to try playing this in there. Okay, number 5, we have Reckless Handling. For 1 and a red, it's a sorcery that says, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it in your hand, hand, shuffled, then discard a card at random. If an artifact card was discarded this way, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. This is going to be awesome because there's a lot of combos that specifically go with artifacts, so this helps you find your combo pieces. But also, a lot of the artifact decks are just red, and red doesn't have a lot of tutors. It's like Gamble, and this is basically Gamble but 1 more mana and only gets artifacts, but that's really good. Especially if you're playing this in an artifact deck, you have a pretty decent chance of discarding an artifact, which then it will deal 2 damage to each opponent, which in a format like Commander, it's not a lot, but it's not nothing. This is really good in decks like Osgir specifically because care specifically about getting artifacts into your graveyard, so that'll be really cool. Number 4 is Sagarda, Font of Blessings for 2 green white. It's a legendary angel that's a 4/4 flying. Other permanents you control have hexproof. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast angels and humans off the top of your library. If you want to play Selesnya Angels, I think this is going to be your best commander. Angels tend to be pretty expensive. Sometimes they're in colors that don't have great card advantage. This is card advantage, and it's a lower mana commander, so you can gain it down, playing off the board a lot quicker, and giving your permanents hexproof is going to be game breaking. And then as far as humans go, I think that this probably isn't a great humans commander, but it is probably going to go in a lot of humans decks just to help with the card advantage thing again. I might consider running this in my human tribal deck. And as far as playing angels and humans together, I don't think there's a ton of payoff in order to do that, but if you wanted to do that, this at least opens up that door for you. Overall, I think this is probably the best Sagarda. Really cool. Number 3 is Sarcon, Soul of Flame. For 1 blue-red, he's a human shaman. That's a 2/4. Dragon spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Sarcon, Soul of Flame become a copy of it until end of turn, except its name is Sarcon, Soul of Flame, and it's legendary in addition to its other types. I think if you're going to play red-blue dragons, this is probably the best commander you could play. It's only 3 mana, you're going to get it down really quick, and it's reducing the cost of your other dragons, which is really helpful because dragons tend to be costing a lot of mana. And even then, if you're not playing him as the commander, he's for sure going to go in the 99 of any dragon deck that can fit him with these colors. He's going to go in Miram, he's going to go in the new Ojutai, he's probably even going to go in the 5-color ones like the Dragon. And his effect is pretty similar to Miram's effect as far as making the copies. Now you might be thinking, well, is that going to legend rule kill my dragons off if I cast a legendary dragon? Well, no, because the copy's name is still Sarcon, so the legend rule won't apply and you'll still get to keep both. I don't know what the best way to optimize that is, but there's a lot of dragons that have good enter the battlefield effects or good attack effects, or they're just heavy hitters, so there's definitely ways to utilize that as well. Overall, I think it's probably the best is a dragon commander, and even if, he's not fancy enough for you or cool enough for you, because, he himself is not a dragon, he's at least going to still go in that deck, and he's probably going to go in any dragon deck that has these colors in it. Next up, we have Karn, Legacy Reforged for 5 mana. He's an artifact creature golem. His power and toughness are equal to the greatest mana value among artifacts you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, add colorless for each artifact you control. This mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells until end of turn. You don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So basically, this is the Power Stone mana that he's creating, so you can't use it to cast anything that is not an artifact spell. However, you can use that mana to activate abilities on other permanents you control, which is incredibly helpful. I think if you're playing a artifact deck, as long as you have a couple targets to hit, I think it's going to be really helpful, especially if you just happen to have a lot of colorless spells, which a lot of artifacts are. He's going to be really, really helpful there. And then I think he's going to be even more of an all-star in decks like, again, Osgir, because he's going to help pay for the activated ability as well. He himself also seems like a pretty interesting commander. I don't know what the best way to build it would be. Probably just big stuff artifacts. Could be a pretty interesting build if you wanted to use him as the commander. The last card I'm talking about today, number 1, is Filter Out. For 1 blue. It's an instant that says return all non-creature, non-land permanents to their owner's hand. This is a great sort of pseudo board wipe effect for blue. Now, obviously, it's not as good as like Cyclonic Rift or something, but it's, half the mana. And it's not hitting creatures. So if someone's swinging out on you and the damage is going to kill you on board, well, there's a good chance you're just going to die anyways, but going to hit treasure tokens. It's going to hit all of their artifacts. So if they're artifact ramping, signets, soul rings, other mana rocks, that's going to hurt them. That's going to set them back a lot. I think this is sort of a new blue staple. And something I meant to to mention with Reckless Handling, these cards are uncommon, so quite a lot of them should get out there, and these cards should be pretty cheap, which is also pretty nice because I think both of these are going to be kind of staple-y, at least in Commander, if not other formats as well. But that's my personal top 10 cards from March of the Machine Aftermath. Again, that's already going over 20% of the set, so I will go ahead and link the rest of the cards in the description of this video. You can go look at the rest of the cards yourself, and then let me know in the comments down below if you have a favorite card that I didn't talk about today. I know I was kind of quick on like the legendary creatures and stuff, but that's because next week I will be doing a tier list of just all of the commanders in the set. 21, I think, of the 50 cards in the set are commanders, so we will have plenty to talk about then. I know that there's some controversy around this set at this point, and you know, we should definitely have that conversation, but overall I am pretty excited about this set. There are a handful of cards I'm really excited to play with, mostly in adding in to decks I already have, but there are a couple cards in here that I'm thinking about building around anyways. So again, let me know what your favorite cards are in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed, like the video, share it with a friend, and we will be back with another video soon.